I'll tell you who else has been speaking out today, though. George Galloway, of course, he unveiled the manifesto for the Workers' Party of Britain. One of the things that he had to say really caught my eye. Listen.
I'm going to make a prediction to you, Andrew. If Keir Starmer becomes the Prime Minister, within 6 months, Britain will be at war. I don't mean a proxy war. I don't mean special forces dressed up as Arabs or Russians, Ukrainians. I mean an actual war with British forces deployed within 6 months of Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister. And then it's game on.
What do you think to that, Aaron Bastani?
Well, it's interesting. As he gets older, George's beard seems to get darker. But
I love that that's your main take.
Apart from that, no, in all seriousness, he is an astute and canny observer on foreign affairs. You don't have to agree with him. He's been proven right many times over the last 20 years. Not always, but very often. And I don't think that's a particularly outlandish point. I think it's very plausible that Britain finds itself in a conflict very soon. British-made weapons have been used not just against Russian forces, but inside Russia. And that was a massive step. And I actually think that's partly why perhaps we're having an election. Because Rishi Sunak thought, as an unelected Prime Minister, I don't want to be the person responsible for taking this country into a major war. So, look, I'm not saying it's likely or inevitable, but I think it's very, very possible. And that's why people should vote, because who leads us into a war matters.
Peter, do you agree with his prediction?
I don't agree with his prediction, but I am filled with foreboding. I think that there is great danger from the way in which we're behaving in Ukraine, that we could be drawn into actual war. I don't say within 6 months. I wouldn't like to give a figure, and it may not happen at all, but we are playing an extremely dangerous game for purposes which I have to say escape me. But I have long ago learned that on the Ukraine, it's a huge disadvantage to know anything about the subject. And I do know a lot about the subject, so I've learned to keep quiet about it because people just shout at me. But we are making a grave mistake, and the fact that George Galloway says we're in danger shouldn't be taken by people as meaning that we aren't.
But then he says, what he specifically said was, if you have Keir Starmer as your Prime Minister, then this is the outcome. If you had someone else as your Prime Minister, do you think that would be avoided or not?
I don't know. I'm not exactly. I'd like to know the context of why he said it in that particular fashion. I'm not sure there's enough difference between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak on the Ukraine to justify saying that. But I think that it is perfectly reasonable to say to the British public that the current policy of the British government in Ukraine is a dangerous one and has unpredictable consequences, and they should be aware of it. But saying there will be war in 6 months if Keir Starmer is Prime Minister is obviously one of those things you can't conceivably prove, and therefore probably shouldn't say. But of course, George, leading a party which is certainly not going to win a general election, and a man who's already on the fringes of politics, can pretty much say what he likes, can't he?
Well, one of my viewers, Ava, she says Galloway is right and also wrong. She says what she thinks is coming is a civil war. God blimey, this is all uplifting, isn't it, everybody?
This tends to happen when George Galloway drifts into the room. It tends to go a bit dark.
Mike, one of my viewers, says, can I just say, to this point, I've only had one person knock on my door canvassing for votes. He says it's a Labour rep. He says, I find that a little bit sad. When I was running for election, I didn't really like knocking on people's doors. I did it, don't get me wrong, but I didn't like it because when people knock on my door, I see it as a bit of a, not a breach of my privacy, that's a bit extreme, but I find it a bit of a, I don't know what the right word is. It's a little bit like, go away, like leave me. I don't answer my door. I don't answer my door if I don't know who it is. I don't answer my phone if I don't recognise the number. Maybe I'm just a bit antisocial, but I just find it a little bit of an invasion of my private space, door knocking.
People have completely changed their attitude towards this over the past 50 years. It used to be perfectly, particularly when I used to do canvassing for a party I won't name in case it means you have to read out lots of stuff. But when I used to do it, you went around the side rather than the front door, but it was not, it was, people answered the door, now they don't. And so I was talking to a parliamentary candidate in another constituency I won't name the other day, he said, nobody answers the door anymore. They just don't do it, so it's gone. And around where I live, in fact, I've seen I think 4 posters for the Labour Party, and they've all been on extremely expensive houses. That's it.
Tim said, in his view, Labour Party normally take over a buoyant economy and then crash it. This time they are taking over what he calls a bit of a crashed already economy. He says it could be interesting. Daniel says, I've been saving up for a house. I've worked 7 days a week for over 2 years to save up my savings pot. So Labour can sling their hook, he says, if they want to try and get their hands on his savings. I've got an interesting question. I might come back to it after the break, but one of my viewers says, can you just ask Peter? It's David. Peter said that, can you ask Peter, in his opinion, how do we ever get change as an electorate then if we don't change our vote away from establishment parties? I'll let them ponder that.
Listen to me. That's what you have to do.
If you
listened to me in 2010, you could have done it. It was perfectly safe to ditch the Conservative Party in 2010. All you had was the remains of Gordon Brown. You didn't have this menace that we have from Starmer. You could have done it then, but you wouldn't listen.
Well, will you be listening to Peter, or have you got a strong opinion in a different direction? Get in touch, don't be shy. All the usual ways, lots to talk about after the break.